Professor Kenneth Boffard is an emeritus professor of the University of Witwatersrand and the trauma director of Milpark Trauma Center in Johannesburg, South Africa. His presentation is titled Wresting the Grim Reaper. Professor Boffard, please.
Please go ahead.
Good day, everybody. Welcome to yet another amazing session from the Asian Collaboration for Trauma. It's a privilege to take part. I was asked to talk about a lifetime of lessons learned from the Grim Reaper or elsewhere. And I thought about this for a while and then thought, let's look at what I've learned from where I've learned it and from whom I've learned it. We stand on the shoulders of giants. And this was a phrase first used by Isaac Newton 400 some years ago. The giant in trauma, above all else, is Donald Trunke, the father of trauma. And I was privileged to learn so much from him. There's a story about Don, who always used to sit on a stool at the bottom of the resuscitation table in his greens, reaching out and holding a patient's foot. The patient came in severe distress and looked up and said, "If I were you, I would drain his pneumothorax." And legend said that Don was the only person who could diagnose a pneumothorax from holding a foot. But what Don was doing was looking at the entire patient, seeing the dyspnea, seeing the restlessness, and knowing exactly what was wrong. On the shoulders of giants, and I have had others and I'm indebted to them. David Hoyt, Len Jacobs, Owen Thal, Wayne Meredith, L.D. Britt, Gene Moore, Bill Schwab, Ron Mayer, Stan Lenquist from Sweden, Stephen Dean from Australia, and Brent Eastman, and many, many others. It's been a privilege to learn so much from so many. Trauma really started at the building of the Queen's Hospital in 1856 in Birmingham in England. It was built by public subscription and lay really underused for about 100 years. The decision was then made that Britain needed a hospital because they were going to have a lot of casualties from airborne invasion of the Netherlands during the Second World War. And that hospital was converted in 1944 to become the Birmingham Accident Hospital. And it was the world's first true trauma hospital and existed for something in the region of 50 years, closed in 1993, but left a legacy forever. And I was privileged again to work there and see what could be done for the trauma patient in the right environment. So I'm going to look at failures of where trauma care is. We sometimes lose quality by failing to use or develop a trauma system. Trauma hospitals are part of that system, but they consist of, above all else, an understanding of the physiology, as well as duties in prevention, response, treatment, and rehabilitation. This came from Trunke again. Failure to use a trauma system, get the right patient to the right hospital at the right time and to the right team. And the keystone of good trauma care is the trauma team, or any team. I'm going to show you a 2.5-minute video. You may remember a pilot landed his plane on the Hudson River with both engines failed. Just to remind you, 2 hours and 7 seconds.
Cactus 1549, 700, climbing 5,000.
Cactus 1549, report to the contact line, maintain 15,000.
Maintain 15,000, Cactus 1549.
Cactus 1549, turn left lane 270.
This is Cactus 1539, hit birds, cross thrust on both engines, returning back towards LaGuardia.
Okay, you need to return to LaGuardia. Turn left heading up 220.
220.
Tower, stop your departures, got emergency returning. It's 1529. He bird strike, he lost all engine, he lost the thrust in the engines, he's returning immediately.
Cactus 1529, which engines?
He lost thrust in both engines, he said.
Got it.
Cactus 1529, We can get it to you. Do you want to try to land runway 13?
We're unable. We may end up in Hudson.
All right, cactus 1549. It's going to be less traffic to runway 31.
Unable.
Okay, what do you need to land? Do you want to try to go to Teterboro?
Yes.
Teterboro, Empire. Actually, LaGuardia Departs Sky Emergency inbound.
Hey, guys.
Cactus 1529 over the George Washington Bridge. Wants to go to your airport right now.
Wants to go to our airport. Check. Does he need assistance?
Yes, it was a bird strike. Can I get him in for runway 1?
Runway 1, that's good.
Cactus 1529, turn right 280. You can land runway 1 at Teterboro.
We can't do it.
Okay, which runway would you like at Teterboro?
We're going to be in Hudson.
I'm sorry, say again, Cactus? Cactus 1549, radar contact is lost. You also got Newark Airport up at 2 o'clock in about 7 miles. Eagle Flight 4718, turn left thing 210.
210, 4718. I think he said he was going to the Hudson.
Cactus 1529, you saw him?
Two minutes and 7 seconds from crisis to successful outcome. And he was asked, to what do you attribute your success? And his answer was quite simple. I knew that if I did my job, everyone else would do theirs. That is what we had been trained for. We worked as a team. But he did say something else. He said, for 42 years I've been flying. Every year I have made a small deposit in the bank of experience. Today I made a large withdrawal, but I had enough funds to cover it. So I've taken the liberty of changing the title of my talk from what have I learned to what decision making can be done when there's no team, if there's no experience, if it's out of the zone of comfort. And I've changed it to good judgment comes from experience, experience comes from bad judgment. Some of you may have heard that before. Experience is simply the name we give to our mistakes and maybe others. Experience without theory is blind, but theory without experience is mere intellectual play. Good judgment comes from experience, hopefully ours as well as others. Experience comes from bad judgment, hopefully others as well as our own. Errors are inevitable in the aviation and in the surgical industry. They're a consequence of human performance, and the systems approach has been adopted to try and minimize and understand how these errors arise. In aviation, it's quite simple. Error is normal. Do not blame error, anticipate and prevent it. And most of my life has been spent, and what I have learned from is learning about mistakes. How did they happen? How did we stop them happening again? So we look at learning, which is a knowledge or skill. We look at education, which is the change in mindset with information, the when to do something. And we look at training, the action to change the skill set, the how to act on this information. To do that, you can become a better surgeon, and you can become a safer surgeon. The bottom line is clearly communication. Surgeons and anesthetists frequently tend to talk at each other, not to each other. We need to communicate. We need to understand there's a common goal of returning the patient's physiology to normal. Surgery is only one way of doing that. You have to have situational awareness. You have to be aware of what the circumstances are around what you're going to do. And if you lose the big picture, you lose your ability to get the best results from what you have. In 2009, an Air France Airbus 330 crashed into the Atlantic Ocean. The computer, autopilot, thought that there were inconsistencies, instructed the crew to climb and to add power, and the crew carried out those instructions even though they were due to erroneous inputs. It got worse and worse, and they passed the point of no return. The captain was in fact locked out of the cabin simply because of the high altitude of the aircraft. They crashed because they didn't fly the aircraft. They did what the computer taught them to do, and they made the same mistakes worse. The findings were quite simple. The technical limitations of the simulator, whose satisfactory in most cases, does not allow certain unusual situations to be stimulated. So the non-technical skills that go with any surgical or other procedure revolve around communication into 4 distinct areas. The decision-making, which is based on experience, the awareness, the teamwork, and the management of the task in hand, and the ability to communicate it to those involved in the situation. And medical error is a huge cause of death in trauma as it is elsewhere. Most of them are related to poorly performing teams and poor outcomes based on poor decisions. We all know where we want to go. We can see, some of us can, clear horizons, very smooth way to get the aircraft. But unless there's communication of the teams, some of the hidden information does not emerge, and tragedies can result. There are lots of errors. Errors of omission. The plane at the top had been serviced, was pushed out of the hangar. There were no chocks or brakes. There was nobody at the controls, and then no one realized there was a slope on the apron outside, so no one could stop it. That bottom left picture, very worrying, but only when you realize that the pilot forgot to put his safety catch on and fired his missile from the deck of the aircraft carrier that you realize the gravity of the situation. There are errors of commission. One would hope that the captain of that particular aircraft wasn't going to land, but very clearly it seems that's what he's going to do. There's errors of interpretation. The pilot landing on this runway in Hong Kong interpreted the conditions around him in error, and he underestimated the wind, and this is the results, and this has happened more than once. There are errors of judgment. This plane was unable to land on this runway. Or put another way, this patient did not have the reserves that are required for the surgery that was contemplated. So we have a failure of situation awareness. The surgeon, us, is not aware of everything else that's going on around. We have errors in the use of fluids, hopefully less frequently than they are. We give too many fluids. We load fluids in the wrong form. You've got to have balanced loading of fluids, and you probably need to be providing blood and blood products as the best way of managing that balance. We fail to monitor temperature. We fail to realize how deep the snow is. We fail to realize that a temperature of 34 degrees carries a 50% mortality. We fail to look around us and realize what our environment holds for our patients, and how sometimes the environment can complicate the patients. So I have become conscious, and I'm always aware of the environment around me, and that includes the people and the equipment, and what is needed and what is absent. We inevitably fail to seek help early enough. There's nothing worse than an overconfident or maybe an underconfident surgeon, but we do have to match where we're going to the resources and the outcomes available. So ultimately, if we fail to appreciate the balance of care, we will not provide the care we were taught to provide. Appropriate and safe surgery. 120 years ago, the President of the Royal College of Surgeons of England said every operation in surgery is an experiment in bacteriology. I have learned to have an in-depth knowledge of infection control and infectious diseases because, to be honest, it affects every one of my patients. Good judgment comes from experience. If what you're doing does not work, it's not the patient's fault. Don't repeat the same mistakes. Once is unfortunate, twice is coincidence, 3 times is enemy action. And several people have commented on this. Richard Branson, don't be embarrassed by your failures. Learn from them, but do not repeat them. Chester Barnard, to try and fail is at least to learn. To fail to try is to suffer the inestimable loss of what might have been. And Benjamin Franklin, by failing to prepare, you are preparing to fail. May not actually have been Benjamin Franklin, but the statement is correct. So failing to appreciate the physiology and the changes of physiology is one of the best ways of preparing to fail. A surgeon must understand the physiology of the patient, and the job is to restore oxygen delivery to the cells, a combination of transport, temperature, and metabolism. I would expect every surgeon to have an understanding of that. Hemorrhage control. The treatment of bleeding is to stop the bleeding. A blood transfusion arguably is an admission of failure to do that. Surgeons have to have an understanding of why you bleed and how to stop it. As a reminder, no matter what else we have, factor 14, there are only 13 factors, is the single commonest cause of bleeding. Factor 14 is the surgeon. Failure to protect the brain. Primary brain injury does not cause shock. Shock causes secondary brain injury. So what have I learnt? I have learnt that perfection is the enemy of good. When you have achieved what you want, it may not be perfect, but you've probably achieved it in 20% of the time. Spending another 80% of the time for the last 20% of perfection is harmful. Choose both the surgery and the surgeon wisely. The surgeon must be appropriate, and if not, you may need additional surgical help. And I have learnt long since, you catch more flies with honey than vinegar. There is no need to raise the entire temperature of the discussion when everyone is stressed. Learn from the mistakes that are made, yours and others, and do not repeat them. Know the environment in which you work, and learn to work within that. It may require you to do more with less, but it's better than doing much for one and nothing for others. Document everything that you do. Exhibit curiosity. Always feel free to ask why you or anyone else is doing something. Never feel free to say, why the whatever did you do that? Condemnation has no part. Learn from the competition. In surgery, there is no competition. Excellence is not a monopoly held by me, you, or anyone else. You can compete, but you must supplement. Above all, what have I learned? I've learned to be confident in my knowledge, but to realize my limitations. And I have learned to have the humility always to ask for help early when it may not be needed, than late when it may no longer help. Good judgment comes from experience. Experience comes from bad judgment. And I am privileged to have learned from so many other colleagues good and bad judgment. Lord Moynihan of Leeds again, 120 years ago. Modern medicine has made care safe for the patient. It is our responsibility to remember our history and to make the patient safe for the surgery. Thank you for the privilege. Enjoy the session, and my compliments to the organizers for an amazing series of videos. Thank you.
Okay, hi, I am Dr. Azuddin. I'm a general and trauma surgeon. I'm based in Hospital Ampera in Malaysia, Malaysia, which is located about 20 to 30-minute drive from Kuala Lumpur. Thank you to the ICT for inviting me as a rector for this special webinar today. It is indeed a great honor to be in the presence of an esteemed trauma surgeon, Prof. Ken Boffard, who has shared his lifetime experience with us. It was an excellent talk as usual, Prof. I have met Prof on a few occasions in Singapore and Kuala Lumpur. We had a meeting regarding plan to bring the STC to Malaysia in 2018, but it was put on hold due to pandemic COVID-19. Prof. Boffard has delivered a lecture which titled Good Judgment Come from Experience and Experience Come from the Bad Judgment. As we all know, experience is something only can be gained through life. Prof. had mentioned that all experience, whether it's a good experience or bad experience, must be shared together either with our own colleague or with others formally. In trauma, every case come to our doorstep are not always have the same presentation, unlike the elective surgery where we have to follow the same steps and patterns. The interesting case might present in the middle of the night or once in a blue moon. By sharing the experience, this extreme case might help to save another patient in other place and in another time. Prof also mentioned regarding the importance of team management, which play a very important role in trauma management. A good and clear communication skill in between team members will ensure all the process in saving the patient life will run smoothly. The team members is not only our anesthesia colleague, but it also include emergency physician, transfusion medicine specialists, radiologists, and even all our paramedics. Prof did mention that non-technical skill is important component, and now I think in each component in training of the surgeon, it will improve the outcome of patient care. Prof did mention how we're supposed to remain calm and not to raise our voice during managing critically ill patient. I believe that during our journey as a surgeon or as a trauma surgeon, we do encounter this stress situation during managing our patient. Yes, I do agree with Prof that when the situation becomes toxic, we cannot concentrate in doing our job, and some of our members might get depressed. This will affect overall management of the patient. From the video that Prof shared just now, we can see how calm is the communication between the air traffic controller person and the pilot, and it was managed very good, and all the passengers are safe during that incidents. From Prof lecture just now also, for me, what Prof said is the most important thing that is to know our limitation and to call for help early. Calling for help is not a sign of failure. We should avoid managing the trauma patient in ED in silo. Despite we should alert all our team members early for the sake of limiting the golden hour time, so that the bleeding can be stopped early rather than delay. I'm very impressive of what Prof have contributed in the development of trauma system in South Africa and training throughout the world. In my center, we started to have trauma system not that long time ago, which is in 2010. We tried to establish the trauma system here with our local protocol. And yes, I agree with Prof that the trauma system already helped all my patients and we have a good outcome. Lastly, Prof, we hope that you can continue to share your wisdom, provide us with guidance while we gain our maturity, strength, and courage and confidence in our practice.